really positive stuff too about what we do. I'd like to welcome now Suzanne Dhaliwal, because my brain is now gone, sorry. Suzanne Dhaliwal, who I haven't ever heard speak before, but I've heard amazing things. She's done incredible work working with indigenous communities, but also stuff on heartland and checking the privilege, and she's running an amazing workshop later on today, recentering our movement. It's going on from 3 till 7, and I think there's still some places left if you want to join that. So without further ado, I'll leave you now. Thank you.
It's really great to be here, and I'm really humbled to be asked to speak, and just want to give another thank you to all the organisers, like such amazing work, both to pull this all together and the focus that you chose to bring to it, to bring to head some of the more difficult conversations, some of the more sort of sticky parts, beyond tasks to talk about that we need to start to unpack and think about as we move forward. So it's really nice seeing this picture and remembering what happened at PowerShift in Istanbul. It was a really incredible gathering of people, incredible workshops, connections, and I think what was most interesting as well is what often happens at conferences are the side conversations, the things that happen at the edges and the fringes around these conferences. And so for me, I think what I was most struck by was conversations that I had with a lot of youth from around the planet who are on the front lines of climate change, who are at the doorstep of ecocide, and how they felt in these spaces often. There was a young woman from Bangladesh who had some incredible stories about how she'd been working in her community to stop the elevation of water from coming into her home. And she told this story about how she'd gone to a non-profit and she said to them, I know how to stop water coming in. I've got these pipes, me and my friends, we know how to do it, I just need to get a bit of money. And eventually I looked at her and she said, basically just dismissed her, like, you're just a child, you're just a kid, get out of here. And she kept coming back and asking for the money. And then eventually she got her friends together and they pooled their comic book money and they bought these tubes and they stopped their community from flooding. And when I heard this story, I was just completely overwhelmed and asked her to make sure that she said it at the plenary afterwards. Because for me, it kind of encompassed what's been my sort of experience a lot of the time of working in the non-profit sector and the movement sector, that often the voices of people on the front lines, of people of colour, of frontline communities are often neglected, they're often pushed aside. There's often this sort of feeling that, again, we are replicating colonisation, that often we have non-profits and organisations based in Europe in the centre who are again dictating the solutions for communities. And so when I had this experience at PowerShift, I was quite moved and quite troubled by how is it that we can start to have this conversation, which is a really difficult conversation because we all are facing something that's huge and massive. And I needed to have this conversation with my friends who I'm often on the front lines with, that often I didn't feel represented in these spaces, that I didn't feel that my feelings about my relationship with the police as a woman of colour were often heard when I was planning direct action. And so when I came back to the UK, I did what all people do, a little bit scared, didn't want to say something. I wrote a letter on Facebook out to the movement to try and put this out there. And I was absolutely overwhelmed with the letters that I got from women of colour who worked in different non-profits and different movement spaces who were experiencing the same things, that they were finding it difficult to talk about the experiences of being a person of colour in the climate movement and how that was impacting their ability both to speak up and also to do their jobs at times. And so what I started to do with my great friend Liam was to start just opening spaces to these conversations. And sometimes that would be one-on-one, at pubs, in a coffee shop. And then we slowly started to see that we needed to open more spaces to these dialogues. And so we started to run workshops way that is not full of guilt, and it's not full of shaming and blaming. It's essentially so that we can own our identities as well and see how they affect the work that we do. And they've been really powerful both for me and both for the organising spaces that I've been in as well, because I feel really strongly that as well as making our spaces safe for various communities to work in and to move through some of these barriers, they're also such places of creativity. If we start to hear from different modes of thinking about climate change, that we're allowed to bring our spirituality, our different viewpoints into the way that we organise, it's a really fertile space. And essentially we can't just fix these problems with the mindset that we're coming from, that created them. And so that means opening up the spaces and including communities who are on the front line, who are in our communities that aren't necessarily already in these spaces, not just to bring them to the things that we organise, but to make sure that from the beginning they are also using the planning and the designing and the thinking of solutions and campaigns that they need in their context. So I often get questions sometimes like, well, isn't this a little bit divisive? Like, we're all in this together. Why are you talking about race? Why are you talking about class? We're past that. And I really want to be able to stand as a person of colour in these spaces. I don't want to assimilate in order to be part of the cause. And I think I really want to be able to bring my identity and bring that difference into those spaces. And that's why I've been trying to continue with this work and continue to try and create dialogue spaces that are safer to talk about that. So it's a long process, hundreds and hundreds of years of colonisation that we're up against, and so it's not going to be solved in a quick workshop, of course. But I think the invitation to come to the workshop and have that space is to just start the conversation, to just see what it feels like when we let some of the armor down. And we go on a bit of self-exploration about our identity and how that's impacting our inability to reach out to the communities that we want to. And also, why is it that we're often focusing on governments and corporations, and we often sometimes forget about the power of community and those other elements to bring into our campaigns. So, as we mentioned, I've been working a lot with Indigenous communities that are on the front lines of tar sands in Canada, and they've been incredible teachers for me, and they've really sort of taught me about having these difficult conversations within non-profit spaces and within grassroots spaces. And at first they're really awkward and they're really uncomfortable, and we often think when we come into organising spaces that somehow we've left all that crap outside and we're in these like unified spaces now. And so there is this tension and a difficulty at first with that. But I think once we start having those conversations, we often learn why is it that a community is maybe not sure about working with breeding. And if we look into the history of stopping the fur trade in Canada and how that impoverished a lot of people within those communities, we start to see that there's a history to that. And that does not mean that we don't work with non-profits and we don't work in that space. It means that we can understand a little bit more about the relationships that need to be built, and then we start to think about the way that colonisation and those histories are also built into our movement. And I'm really proud of what we've tried to do at the UK Pathfinder Network, where we work with such a broad spectrum of non-profits, of all sorts of organisations, because we've tried to bring that conversation direct into the middle of it. But yeah, so that's what I really want to say at the moment, and I said it's just the start of the conversation, and this has been a really, really difficult journey for me to sort of start to bring these things out that are uncomfortable, but I